The galactic Concord had maintained an unbroken peace for 2,000 years. Governed by the ancient council, long-lived alien species whose individual members had witnessed centuries of history, the Concord represented the pinnacle of interstellar civilization. Hundreds of worlds and dozens of species lived in harmony, their conflicts relegated to diplomatic chambers and trade negotiations. War was a relic of a primitive past, a concept studied by historians but experienced by none. Humanity had joined this grand alliance a mere 300 years ago. Earth and its handful of colony worlds were the newest members of the Concord, still finding their place among the ancient civilizations. Human ships patrolled designated sectors, participated in scientific expeditions, and contributed to interstellar commerce. But they had never seen actual combat under the Concord's banner. To the ancient council, humans were a species of potential but unproven worth. Admiral David Kane stood at the viewport of the Orion station, watching the solemn proceedings of the ancient council with mild interest. As commander of the Orion Sentinel fleet, his presence was a formality rather than a necessity. The diplomatic corps handled most interactions with the council, leaving military personnel like him to maintain readiness for threats that never materialized. "Another riveting session of interstellar bureaucracy," murmured a voice beside him. Kane turned to find Dr. Elena Martinez, Earth's psychological warfare and alien technology advisor, joining him at the viewport. Her dark eyes studied the assembly with the same analytical intensity she brought to her research. "You look troubled, Dr. Martinez," Kane observed. She tapped her data pad. "Just reviewing some unusual signal patterns from the galactic rim. Probably nothing, but..." She shrugged. 2,000 years of peace makes me nervous." Kane nodded in understanding. Humans hadn't evolved in an environment of perpetual harmony. Something about the Concord's absolute confidence in eternal peace struck many humans as dangerously complacent. "The Valorians are discussing their new terraform project," Kane noted, watching the elegant blue-skinned delegates gesturing at holographic projections. "The Centauri are negotiating expanded trade routes. The Riel are proposing a new cultural exchange program. All very civilized." "Too civilized," Martinez said quietly. "Have you noticed how the ancient council members frown whenever human defense policies come up for review?" Kane had noticed. The elder species seemed uncomfortable with humanity's insistence on maintaining combat readiness, despite the Concord's assurances of universal peace. Privately, Kane suspected the ancient species had forgotten what real conflict felt like. Peace maintained for millennia had a way of dulling instincts. "We're still the new kids," Kane replied diplomatically. "They'll get used to our peculiarities eventually." Before Martinez could respond, an alarm sounded through the station. Not the shrill warning of a catastrophic failure, but a low, pulsing tone indicating an unusual astronomical event. Kane's communicator buzzed simultaneously. "Admiral Kane," he answered crisply. "Sir," came the voice of his tactical officer. "Long-range sensors have detected a fleet at the edge of Concord space. Approximately 250 to 300 vessels of unknown configuration." Kane straightened, immediately alert. "First contact protocol? We've initiated standard greeting procedures on all galactic standard frequencies." "No response." "Sir, they're just sitting there." "I'm on my way to command," Kane said, already moving. He glanced at Martinez. "Doctor, you might want to join me. This could be relevant to your expertise." As they hurried through the station's pristine corridors, Kane noticed the Concord delegates emerging from their chambers, faces showing confusion rather than alarm. Many species here had never experienced a potential threat in their lifetimes. They had just reached the command center when every communication device in the station, personal communicators, public announcement systems, even the ancient council's sacred elder channel, simultaneously broadcast the same message. A cold, metallic voice filled the air. "We are the Zephyrian Empire, Returning after 2,000 years of exile. The peace ends now. All members of the so-called conquered will submit to our authority or face annihilation. Prepare yourselves. The message ended, leaving a silence that felt physical in its intensity. Then, chaos erupted as the ancient council members began shouting in a dozen languages, their translators struggling to keep pace with their panic. "Admiral," his tactical officer called from across the command center, "the unknown fleet has raised some kind of energy field. Our sensors can't penetrate it. They appear to be surrounded by darkness." Kane stared at the holographic display showing the mysterious fleet. Each ship was enveloped in what looked like a shroud of pure black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. "Dr. Martinez," Kane said quietly. "Any thoughts?" Martinez was already analyzing the sensor data. "It's not like any technology I've encountered before, but the timing of the field's activation immediately after their announcement suggests it might be more than just defensive. It could be psychological." An emergency session of the Ancient Council was convened within the hour. Kane and Martinez were invited to attend, though Kane noticed the invitation seemed reluctant, a courtesy extended to lesser species rather than a recognition of valuable allies. The council chamber, normally a model of order and decorum, had descended into barely controlled chaos. The Centauri representative, Elder Malorian, was advocating immediate surrender. "The Zephyrians were the original founders of the Conquered before their exile," he explained, his translucent skin paling with fear. "Their technological superiority was unquestioned. If they have returned, resistance is futile." The Riel ambassador, Mara Rill, countered with caution. "We've spent thousands of years building the Conquered. A war would devastate everything we've achieved. All of us would suffer." The Valorian representative, a stately figure with luminescent markings across his blue skin, suggested assembling a peace force to negotiate with the Zephyrians. "Surely 2,000 years has changed their perspective, as it has changed ours," he argued. Kane listened to the debate with growing frustration. None of them were discussing actual defense. When the council finally acknowledged his presence and asked for the human perspective, he spoke plainly. "Humanity has never abandoned the concept of self-defense," Kane said. "We've maintained our military capabilities even while embracing peace. Perhaps it's time for all species to remember how to fight, because we've never forgotten." His words created an uproar. The ancient species regarded him with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. One elder species representative actually backed away, as if Kane had suggested something obscene. "Admiral Kane," Elder Malorian said sternly, "your species' warmongering tendencies are precisely why humans remain junior members of this Conquered. We have maintained peace for 2 millennia through diplomacy and mutual respect, not through violence." "And yet," Kane replied evenly, "the Zephyrians have just declared war on all of us. Will diplomacy protect your worlds if they choose to attack?" The debate raged for hours, but the outcome was predictable. The Ancient Council issued a directive. The Conquered would submit to Zephyrian authority within 48 hours to preserve peace and prevent bloodshed. The directive spread across all member worlds, instructing populations to prepare for a transition of governance. As the council session adjourned, Kane watched the representatives hurry to their embassies, eager to transmit surrender protocols to their homeworlds. The speed with which they abandoned 2,000 years of sovereignty was both fascinating and disturbing. "They're actually going to do it," Martinez said incredulously as they left the chamber. "They're going to surrender without firing a single shot. What would you expect from civilizations that have forgotten the meaning of resistance?" Kane replied. He activated his secure communicator. "I need an emergency conference with Earth Command and all colonial governors. Priority Alpha." Within an hour, Kane and Martinez were addressing the leadership of Earth and its colonies via quantum-encrypted transmission. President Sophia Liang's expression was grave as she listened to their report. "So, the Ancient Council has ordered universal surrender," she summarized. "And the other species are complying?" "Most appear to be, Madam President," Kane confirmed. "They believe resistance against the Zephyrians would be futile and destructive." President Liang exchanged glances with her military advisors before addressing the gathered colonial governors. "I think we all recognize our position here. We have no true allies in this Concord. If we surrender, we merely delay our own subjugation on terms not of our choosing." Admiral Ryan Davis, commander of Earth's naval forces, spoke up. "Our intelligence suggests the Zephyrians are relying heavily on psychological warfare. Their ships are equipped with some kind of fear-inducing technology, that black shroud our sensors detected. They expect immediate capitulation. What they don't expect," Dr. Martinez added, "is a species that won't be intimidated by shadows and threats. Their weapons haven't been tested against a determined, coordinated opponent in 2,000 years. President Liang nodded decisively. "Then humanity will be that opponent. Earth and all human colonies hereby reject the Ancient Council's directive to surrender. We will defend ourselves and our sovereignty by any means necessary." The colonial governors voiced their agreement one by one. There was no dissent, only determination. "Admiral Kane," President Liang continued, "you will coordinate our defense forces at Orion Station. Admiral Davis will deploy the fleet. Major Sandra Lewis will lead intelligence operations. We need to understand what we're facing." "And the rest of the Concord?" one governor asked. "Do we fight alone?" "For now, yes," President Liang acknowledged. "But we'll extend protection to any species that chooses to resist alongside us." As the conference concluded, Kane was struck by the stark contrast between the human response and that of the Ancient Council. Where the ancient species had chosen submission out of fear, humanity had chosen defiance. What surprised him even more was the public reaction across human worlds. As news of the Zephyrian ultimatum spread, Earth and its colonies didn't descend into panic. Instead, a wave of determined resistance emerged. Social media exploded with defiant memes and rallying cries. Public squares filled with citizens demanding action rather than surrender. One phrase began trending across all human networks. They declared war, and humans just laughed. It wasn't hollow bravado. It was the response of a species that, despite centuries of peace, had never forgotten its fighting spirit. The black shroud that terrified the ancient species served only to awaken humanity's defiance. As Kane walked through Orion Station the next day, he noticed human personnel moving with renewed purpose. Engineers were analyzing Zephyrian communication patterns. Tactical officers were running combat simulations. Intelligence specialists were monitoring the reactions of other species. Dr. Martinez joined him in the command center, her eyes bright with excitement. "We've made a breakthrough," she announced, displaying her findings on the main screen. "That black field around their ships, it's not just defensive. It's a psychological weapon designed to induce fear and hopelessness. The darkness literally projects emotional influence." "Can we counter it?" Kane asked. "Better than that," Martinez replied with a smile. "We can neutralize it completely. The field emits specific frequencies that target the brain's fear response. If we can disrupt those frequencies, the black shroud becomes nothing more than an energy shield, still dangerous, but not paralyzing." Kane immediately authorized development of countermeasures. While the Ancient Council prepared formal surrender protocols, humanity prepared for war. Admiral Davis deployed Earth's naval forces strategically throughout key systems: New Horizon, Kuiper Belt, Proxima Centauri. Each deployment was calculated to protect vital colonies while maintaining tactical flexibility. Dr. Martinez led a team of engineers in developing technology to disrupt the Zephyrian psychological weapons. Their work proceeded with remarkable speed, driven by urgency and ingenuity. Admiral Davis organized crash training programs for military and civilian personnel, focusing on unconventional tactics. "We target their psychological devices first," he instructed. "Disrupt their cloaking technology, then attack their actual forces. They rely on fear more than firepower." Major Sandra Lewis implemented a covert intelligence operation, inserting agents among the surrendering species to gather information about Zephyrian plans and capabilities. Meanwhile, the Zephyrians consolidated their position. Their fleet of 300 warships, led by the ominous flagship Dread Shadow, established control over surrendered conquered territories. Their commander, Supreme Marshal Taras Vok, ordered the subjugated species to provide resources and support for the Zephyrian fleet. What Vok didn't anticipate was the resistance brewing among the conquered populations. Inspired by humanity's defiance, small factions within several species began questioning their leader's hasty surrender. A Valorian resistance movement formed under the leadership of Elder Zoran, who had witnessed the ancient wars before the Conquered's formation. Centauri dissidents established underground networks to sabotage Zephyrian control systems. These resistance movements were small compared to the overwhelming majority who accepted surrender, but they created valuable allies for humanity's cause. As the 48-hour deadline approached, the Ancient Council formally transmitted their surrender to the Zephyrian fleet. Almost simultaneously, Earth transmitted its refusal. "The human species rejects your ultimatum," President Liang's message stated boldly. "We will defend our sovereignty and the right of all species to live free from domination. If you seek conquest, you will find only resistance." The Zephyrian response was immediate and predictable. Supreme Marshal Vok redirected a portion of his fleet toward human territories, confident that this upstart species would quickly learn the price of defiance. What he didn't expect was that humanity was prepared and waiting. The decisive confrontation began at the edge of the solar system. The Zephyrian fleet, consisting of 300 warships, led by the imposing Dread Shadow, approached Earth's defensive perimeter with overwhelming confidence. Their black shrouds rippled against the starscape, designed to project terror into the hearts of their enemies. Admiral Kane issued the attack command from his flagship. "Operation Liberation is a go. All units, execute as planned." Major Lewis's scout ships penetrated the Zephyrian defensive line, activating a network of traps that ensnared their smallest vessels. Aerospace fighters swept through the Zephyrian sensor grid, forcing the Dread Shadow to intensify its psychological field to maintain control. Dozens of battleships from Admiral Davis's fleet targeted the psychological emitters specifically, stripping away the black shroud, layer by layer, from Earth. Dr. Martinez controlled strategic satellites, broadcasting interference patterns that disrupted the Zephyrian psychological signals, causing their ships to lose their fear-inducing capabilities. Admiral Kane's heavy artillery squadrons concentrated their firepower on the Dread Shadow, breaking through its defensive systems and damaging its command bridge. Without the Black Shroud to induce terror, the Zephyrian tactical advantage collapsed. Their formations fell into disarray as human forces systematically disabled their key weapons and communication systems. The battle lasted less than 6 hours. By its end, the Dread Shadow was crippled. Dozens of Zephyrian heavy cruisers were disabled, and Supreme Marshal Vok was forced to activate the surrender channel, a communication system he had never expected to use. "This is Supreme Marshal Taras Vok of the Zephyrian Empire." His transmission began, voice tight with barely controlled rage. We are standing down operations against human territories." The news of humanity's victory spread rapidly throughout the Conquered. Worlds that had surrendered without resistance watched in astonishment as the dreaded Zephyrian fleet retreated before human forces. The psychological effect was immediate. If humans could defeat the Zephyrians, perhaps surrender had been premature. Zephyrian forces stationed on conquered worlds suddenly found themselves facing uprisings. The Valorian resistance, led by Elder Zoran, launched coordinated attacks against Zephyrian command centers. Centauri dissidents sabotaged Zephyrian communication networks. Even the Riel, among the first to advocate surrender, began passive resistance campaigns. The Concord was fractured but simultaneously being restructured under a new alliance led by Earth. Admiral Kane established a military academy at Orion Station, training representatives from species that had previously known only peace in the art of coordinated defense. Dr. Martinez lectured on psychological warfare ethics and defense to students from dozens of species. Her courses became the most attended in the academy, as former members of the Concord sought to understand how humanity had overcome the fear that had paralyzed their own civilizations. The ancient council was dissolved, replaced by an interspecies defense council that included representatives from all member worlds, regardless of their species age or technological advancement. Earth, once the newest and least respected member of the Concord, now held a position of leadership. The transition wasn't without cost. Many worlds suffered damage during the liberation from Zephyrian control. Civilian casualties, while not catastrophic, created a somber reminder of war's price. Reconstruction became a priority, with human engineers and medical teams deployed to assist the most affected regions. 6 months after the decisive battle, Admiral Kane stood at the same viewport where he had watched the ancient council's deliberations. The view was different now. Reconstruction vessels moved purposefully between damaged sections of Orion Station, and ships from a dozen species conducted joint training exercises in the space beyond. Dr. Martinez joined him, datapad in hand as always. "The Valorian resistance is officially joining the Defense Council," she reported. "Elder Zoran will be their representative." "Good," Kane nodded. "He fought well when it mattered." "Ambassador Riel of the Riel is requesting expanded defense training for their security forces," Martinez continued. "Apparently, they've discovered a taste for self-determination." Kane smiled slightly. Amazing how quickly perspectives can change when faced with real choices between freedom and subjugation. Martinez's expression grew serious. "I've been analyzing intelligence from beyond the former conquered borders. There are indications of another power rising in the uncharted regions. Something that might make the Zephyrians look like a minor threat in comparison." Kane wasn't surprised. The galaxy was vast, and 2,000 years of willful ignorance had left the Concord blind to potential dangers. "Then, we'll be ready," he said simply. "True peace never comes from avoiding conflict, but from being prepared to defend what matters." As they stood watching the reconstruction, a drone cam panned across a newly rebuilt section of the station. A sign hung prominently at the entrance. "Welcome to the Alliance of Peace and Defense 2.0. But far beyond, barely visible against the starfield, a mysterious light flickered, a reminder that vigilance would be the price of their hard-won freedom. In the Academy training hall, Elder Zoran was addressing a class of mixed-species cadets. Once a fierce advocate for peaceful surrender, the Elder Valorian now spoke with the conviction of one who had learned through bitter experience. "For 2,000 years," he told the attentive students, "we believed peace was the absence of conflict. We were wrong. Peace is the capacity to face conflict without fear. The humans taught us that a smile in the face of threats is more powerful than any weapon." A human cadet raised her hand. "Elder Zoran, is it true that when the Zephyrians declared war, humans actually laughed?" The ancient Valorian's luminescent markings pulsed with amusement. "Yes, young one. They laughed, and that laughter echoed through the hollow eyes of 1,000 stars." On Earth, President Liang addressed the United Earth Council, her expression solemn yet hopeful. "The reformed Concord, now the Interstellar Defense Alliance, faces challenges our ancestors could never have imagined. But we face them together, with open eyes and unwavering resolve." She gestured to a holographic display showing reconstruction efforts across formerly occupied worlds. We have learned that peace maintained through willful blindness is merely delayed catastrophe. True peace requires vigilance, courage, and the willingness to stand firm against those who would threaten freedom. The council chamber erupted in applause. Among the delegates were representatives from species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive and warlike. Now they looked to Earth for leadership and protection. In the depths of space, beyond the borders of known civilization, Supreme Marshal Terras Vok stood aboard a battered escape vessel. The once proud commander of the Zephyrian Empire had been reduced to a fugitive, fleeing the collapse of his forces across former conquered space. "They will pay," he muttered to his few remaining loyal officers. "The humans and their allies will pay for this humiliation." One officer, braver than the rest, spoke hesitantly. "Supreme Marshal, perhaps we underestimated them. Their technology wasn't superior. It was their spirit. They laughed at our threats. No species has ever done that before." Vok's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Then we must find allies who can crush their spirit. There are powers in the void that even humans cannot laugh at." The officer fell silent, but a seed of doubt had been planted. He had seen humans fight. He had witnessed their determination. And somewhere deep in his Zephyrian soul, he wondered if any power in the universe could break a species that responded to war declarations with laughter. Back at Orion Station, Admiral Kane reviewed defense protocols with his newly formed multi-species command staff. The Zephyrian threat had been neutralized, but Kane knew better than to assume peace would last forever. History had a way of repeating itself, especially for those who failed to learn its lessons. "The first rule of interstellar defense," he told his officers, "is never to assume your enemy thinks like you do. The Zephyrians believed fear would paralyze us, because fear would have paralyzed them. Understanding different psychology is as important as understanding different technology." A Centauri officer, one of the resistance fighters who had opposed his species' surrender, asked, "How did humans maintain their fighting spirit through centuries of peace? The rest of us lost ours." Kane considered the question carefully. "Humanity never experienced the 2,000 years of absolute peace that the conquered did. Even during our centuries within the conquered, we maintained military readiness because our history taught us that peace is precious, precisely because it is fragile." "And the laughter?" a real officer inquired. "Our people were terrified by the Zephyrian announcement, yet humans responded with humor. Why?" Dr. Martinez, who had joined the briefing, answered this one. "Laughter in the face of threats is a uniquely powerful psychological response. It demonstrates that the threat has failed to achieve its intended effect. When humans laugh at something scary, we're not denying the danger. We're refusing to be controlled by fear of it." The explanation resonated with the alien officers. Many had witnessed the collapse of Zephyrian control over their worlds, once the population's fear had been replaced with determination. Major Lewis, now promoted to colonel for her exceptional intelligence work during the conflict, provided an update on the status of former Zephyrian territories. Most of their command structure has been captured or eliminated. Their psychological technology has been neutralized and is being studied for defensive applications. The conquered worlds are establishing new governments, many modeled after Earth's democratic systems. "And Supreme Marshal Vok?" Kane asked. "Still at large," Lewis admitted. "Our intelligence suggests he fled to the uncharted regions beyond former conquered space. We're monitoring for any sign of his return." The meeting concluded with a review of the new defense protocols being implemented across Alliance space. Every member world, regardless of size or technological advancement, was now required to maintain basic defense capabilities and participate in joint training exercises. As the officers filed out, Dr. Martinez lingered behind. "I've been analyzing the psychological aspects of our victory," she told Kane. "Do you know what the turning point was? It wasn't our technology or tactics, though those were crucial. It was the moment when the Zephyrians realized their fear weapon had no effect on us." They had no contingency for an enemy that couldn't be intimidated. Kane nodded thoughtfully. Fear is their weapon, but courage is ours, and courage is contagious. Once the other species saw that resistance was possible, everything changed. There's something else, Martinez added, lowering her voice. The intelligence I mentioned earlier, about a new threat emerging beyond Alliance space. I've been analyzing signal patterns and energy signatures. Whatever's out there, it's not Zephyrian. It's something older. Something that might have been watching us all along. Kane's expression remained steady, but his mind was already calculating potential responses. Keep monitoring. Inform me of any developments, no matter how small. If there's another threat coming, we'll be ready. As they walked together through the bustling corridors of Orion Station, Kane noticed something that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. Mixed groups of humans and various alien species, training together, sharing meals, exchanging stories and tactical theories. The enforced peace of the old Concord had kept species diplomatically cordial, but fundamentally separate. Now, united by shared struggle, they were forming genuine bonds. "Admiral!" called a voice. Elder Zoran approached, his blue skin luminescent with excitement. "Our engineers have successfully integrated the human defensive systems with our Valorian energy grid. The efficiency increase exceeds projections by 27%. "Excellent work, Elder," Kane responded. "Have you shared the integration protocols with the Centauri and Real teams?" "Already done," Zoran confirmed. "They're implementing modifications for their own energy systems now." As the Valorian hurried away to continue his work, Martinez smiled. "Remember when he advocated immediate surrender to the Zephyrians? Now he's one of our most enthusiastic allies." "People change when they discover their own strength," Kane replied. "The same applies to entire species." In the following weeks, the Alliance of Peace and Defense continued to evolve. Earth's military academies welcomed students from dozens of formerly pacifist worlds. Joint research projects combined the unique technological specialties of various species to create new defensive systems. Intelligence networks extended their reach, monitoring for any sign of Zephyrian resurgence or new threats. On New Boston, a human colony that had suffered significant damage during the conflict, reconstruction was proceeding rapidly. Governor Thomas Chen surveyed the rebuilt city center with pride. Where Zephyrian bombardment had left craters, new structures now stood stronger, more resilient, designed not just to restore what was lost, but to improve upon it. A memorial wall had been erected in the central plaza, commemorating those lost in the battle. Unlike traditional war memorials, this one bore an inscription that looked forward rather than back. "The price of freedom is eternal vigilance." Beside the memorial stood a striking sculpture, a human figure laughing, face turned upward toward the stars. It had become an unofficial symbol of the resistance, a reminder of humanity's unexpected response to the Zephyrian threat. Governor Chen was joined by Ambassador Mara Rill of the Riel, who had come to observe the reconstruction efforts. "Your people rebuild quickly," she noted, her translator conveying admiration. "We've had practice," Chen replied with a slight smile. "Human history is full of destruction and rebuilding. It's something of a specialty." "The Riel Council has approved the defense training program," Riel informed him. "Our first cadets will arrive at Earth's academies next month. It's a significant change for my people. For 2,000 years, we believed that maintaining peace meant avoiding all knowledge of conflict. And now?" Rill gazed at the laughing figure of the sculpture. "Now, we understand that peace must be defended, not just with weapons, but with courage and determination." She hesitated, then added, "When the Zephyrians issued their ultimatum, my people were paralyzed with fear. We had forgotten how to resist, but humans laughed. I still don't fully understand it, but I want my people to learn that strength." On the far side of Alliance space, Colonel Lewis led a special operations team investigating an abandoned Zephyrian outpost. The facility had been hastily evacuated when news of the Zephyrian defeat reached the sector, leaving behind valuable intelligence. Team leader to control, Lewis reported. We've secured the command center. Data systems appear intact. Beginning extraction now. Her specialists worked quickly, copying the Zephyrian databases while security teams maintained a protective perimeter. The outpost felt eerie in its emptiness, a monument to an empire that had believed itself invincible until confronted with an enemy that refused to be intimidated. "Colonel," called one of her data specialists, "I've found something unusual. Communication logs indicate the Zephyrians were receiving transmissions from beyond the galactic rim, from uncharted space." Lewis joined him at the console, studying the encrypted data. "Can you determine the content?" "Negative. But the frequency and pattern suggest it wasn't Zephyrian in origin. They were communicating with someone else, possibly the source of their psychological technology." The implication was clear and troubling. If the Zephyrians had allies or masters beyond known space, the threat might not be over. Lewis ordered immediate transmission of the findings to Alliance Command and Dr. Martinez's research team. Dr. Martinez received the data while working in her laboratory at Orion Station. She had assembled a team of the brightest minds from across the Alliance: human, Valorian, Centauri, Riel, and others, to study Zephyrian technology and develop countermeasures against any future psychological warfare. The new information from Lewis's team cast their work in a more urgent light. "These transmission patterns," Martinez told her colleagues, displaying the data on the main screen. "They're similar to the operating frequencies of the Zephyrian fear devices, but more complex, more evolved." A Valorian scientist, Dr. Tavril, examined the patterns closely. "This suggests the Zephyrians didn't develop their psychological technology independently. They acquired it from another source, one potentially more advanced. Which means," Martinez concluded, "that we may face an enemy that makes the Zephyrians look primitive by comparison." She immediately forwarded the analysis to Admiral Kane and Alliance Command, recommending increased surveillance of the uncharted regions beyond the galactic rim. Kane received the report during a meeting with President Liang and the Alliance Defense Council. The implications were discussed with appropriate gravity. No one wanted to create panic, but preparedness was essential. "We'll accelerate the defensive infrastructure upgrades," President Liang decided, "and increase long-range sensor deployment along the borders of uncharted space. If something's coming, we need as much warning as possible." "The Zephyrians thought they could conquer us through fear," Kane observed. "Whatever's beyond the rim may have taught them that strategy. We should prepare for psychological warfare on an even greater scale." Elder Zoran, now the Valorian representative on the Defense Council, spoke with the wisdom of his species' long history. Before the Concord, before the 2,000 years of peace, there were stories, legends, really, of entities that dwelled in the darkness between galaxies, beings that fed on fear and despair. Most dismissed these as primitive superstitions, but perhaps there was truth in them. The Council authorized Kane to implement a comprehensive defense strategy, combining military preparedness, psychological training, and advanced early warning systems. Dr. Martinez was tasked with developing more sophisticated countermeasures against fear-based technologies, while Colonel Lewis expanded her intelligence network to monitor for any sign of Zephyrian resurgence or new threats. 1 year after the Zephyrian declaration of war, the Alliance of Peace and Defense held a commemoration ceremony at Orion Station. Representatives from every member world gathered to honor those lost in the conflict and celebrate their hard-won freedom. Admiral Kane addressed the assembly, his words transmitted across Alliance space. 1 year ago, the peace that had endured for 2,000 years was shattered by threats of conquest and subjugation. For most species of the former conquered, that moment brought paralysis and despair. But for humanity, it brought clarity and resolve. He paused, looking out at the diverse gathering of species that now stood united. We discovered that true peace never comes from avoiding conflict, but from being prepared to defend what matters. We learned that courage is contagious, and that even the most fearsome enemy can be defeated when we refuse to be intimidated. Dr. Martinez spoke next, focusing on the psychological aspects of their victory. The Zephyrians weaponized fear, believing it would ensure their conquest. They failed to understand that different species respond differently to threats. Where they expected submission, they found defiance. Where they expected terror, they found laughter. President Liang concluded the ceremony with a forward-looking message. Today, we honor our past, but we look to our future. The Alliance stands stronger than the conquered ever did, because we understand that unity must be actively maintained, not passively assumed. Together, we will face whatever challenges the universe presents. As the formal proceedings ended, the gathered representatives moved to a reception in the station's grand observation dome. Through the transparent ceiling, the stars shone brilliantly against the void of space. Somewhere out there, beyond the familiar constellations, unknown threats might be gathering. But here, within the Alliance, former enemies had become allies, and peace was no longer taken for granted. Elder Zoran found himself conversing with a group of young cadets from various species. "Is it true," one asked, "that humans laughed when the Zephyrians declared war? That seems difficult to believe." Zoran's luminescent markings pulsed with amusement. "Oh, it's entirely true. I witnessed it myself. When the announcement came, when my own leaders were preparing surrender documents, human civilians were creating what they call memes about the situation. Their social networks were filled with jokes and defiant messages. Their military personnel didn't panic. They planned. But weren't they afraid? A Centauri cadet pressed. Afraid? Perhaps. Fear is natural. But humans have a remarkable ability to transform fear into determination. They don't deny danger. They face it with resolute spirits and, yes, with humor. As the reception continued, Admiral Kane noticed Dr. Martinez standing alone by the observation window. Her expression troubled as she gazed at the stars. "You're thinking about what's out there," he said, joining her. She nodded. "The transmissions Lewis found. The ancient legends Zoran mentioned. I can't help feeling we've only encountered the first wave of something larger. Then we'll be ready for the second wave," Kane replied with quiet confidence. "And the third, and however many come after. That's the difference between now and a year ago. We're no longer pretending peace can exist without vigilance." Martinez smiled slightly. "You know what still amazes me? That first day, when the Zephyrians made their announcement. I expected panic, but instead, I saw humans sharing jokes about it, creating ridiculous memes, rallying around the idea of kicking bully ass. It was inspiring. Laughter in the face of threats," Kane mused. "It's a uniquely effective defense mechanism. Hard to terrorize someone who's laughing at you." As they spoke, a slight disturbance rippled through the gathered dignitaries. Colonel Lewis had arrived, her expression urgent as she made her way directly to Kane and Martinez. "Admiral, Doctor," she said in a low voice. "Our long-range sensors have detected unusual energy signatures at the edge of charted space, similar to the Zephyrian vessels, but larger, more powerful." Kane maintained his composure, conscious of the celebrating guests nearby. "How long?" "At current velocity, 6 months before they reach Alliance territory. But there's something else." Lewis handed them a data tablet. "The energy patterns surrounding these new vessels, they're different from the Zephyrian Black Shroud. More complex. Dr. Martinez's team needs to see this immediately." Martinez studied the data, her scientific mind already analyzing potential countermeasures. "We'll need to modify our disruptors. The frequency patterns are similar, but operating at a higher amplitude. It's like comparing a whisper to a scream. Kane nodded decisively. Brief the Defense Council tomorrow morning. Tonight, we let our people celebrate their victory. Tomorrow, we prepare for the next challenge. As Lewis departed to make the necessary arrangements, Kane and Martinez rejoined the reception, their concern hidden behind diplomatic smiles. Around them, representatives of a dozen species mingled freely, united by their shared experience of resistance and liberation. A young human lieutenant approached, offering ceremonial drinks. "To the Alliance," she toasted. "To vigilance," Kane responded, raising his glass. "To laughter in the face of darkness," Martinez added with a meaningful glance at Kane. Far beyond Alliance space, beyond the reach of their most powerful sensors, a vast fleet moved silently through the void. Each vessel was surrounded not by the simple black shroud of the Zephyrians, but by a shifting, mesmerizing darkness that seemed to bend light and reality around it. On the command deck of the largest vessel, Supreme Marshal Terrace Vok knelt before a viewing screen that showed only swirling darkness. "The humans defeated us," he reported, his voice trembling slightly. "Their resistance inspired others. The conquered has been transformed into a defensive alliance." A voice responded from the darkness, not transmitted through technology, but seemingly materialized directly in Vok's mind. "As we anticipated, the Zephyrians were merely the test. The humans' response provides valuable data." "They laughed at our threats," Vok said, still unable to comprehend this reaction. "When we activated the fear projectors, they responded with jokes and defiance." "Interesting," the voice purred. "A species immune to fear projection requires different methods. You have served your purpose, Terrace Vok. The true harbingers will now proceed as planned." As the communication ended, Vok remained kneeling, aware that he had been merely a pawn in a game beyond his understanding. The Zephyrian Empire, once proud and feared, had been nothing more than an experiment, a probe sent to test the defenses and psychology of the species inhabiting this region of space. The true threat was only beginning to emerge from the darkness beyond the stars. Back on Orion Station, the celebration continued, unaware of the conversation that had just occurred in the distant void. But in the command center, automated systems registered a faint, almost imperceptible signal, a ripple in the cosmic background radiation that might have been dismissed as random noise. Except that it repeated 3 times, with perfect precision. And deep in the pattern recognition algorithms, an alert was triggered. Something was coming. Something that made the Zephyrians look like a mere prelude. The 2,000 years of peace were truly over, but humanity, and their newfound allies, were no longer afraid. In the reception hall, a Valorian elder raised her glass in a traditional blessing. "To those who laugh in the face of darkness," she intoned, "for they shall never be conquered by fear." The gathered representatives responded in unison, their voices forming a harmonious chorus of determination that seemed to resonate through the station and beyond, into the starlit void where unknown challenges awaited. They laugh, and their laughter echoes through the hollow eyes of 1,000 stars.